Today we'll explore one of history's most emotional true stories. Behind the royal glamour was a heartbreaking secret, a love triangle that changed the British monarchy forever. This is the untold story of Princess Diana, Prince Charles, and Camilla Parker Bowles. As you listen, focus on pronunciation, emotion, and vocabulary. Train your ears for English listening practice, and let's begin our royal journey. The story of Diana, Charles, and Camilla isn't just about royalty, it's about love, duty, and the cost of living under constant public pressure. Diana's life reminds us that even in heartbreak, kindness can shine through. Today, we're not here to judge or take sides. We're here to understand three people caught in an impossible situation where personal happiness collided with centuries of tradition, where private pain became public spectacle, and where the human heart struggled against the weight of a crown. This is their story, not as tabloid headlines, but as human beings. Let's go back to 1980. Diana Spencer was 19 years old, a kindergarten teacher with a shy smile and an aristocratic background. Charles was 32, the Prince of Wales, and under immense pressure to marry and produce an heir. But here's what most people don't know. Charles and Diana barely knew each other. They'd met only 13 times before he proposed. 13 times. Most of us have more interactions with our barista in a month. Diana later said she saw herself as a lamb to the slaughter. But in that moment, saying yes to a prince felt like a dream come true. Who wouldn't be swept up in it? The palace, the prestige, the promise of becoming a princess. The wedding in July 1981 was watched by 750 million people worldwide. Diana's dress had a 25-foot train. The kiss on the balcony became iconic. The world fell in love with what looked like a perfect fairy tale. But fairy tales, as we know, aren't real. Behind the cameras, Diana was already struggling. She was bulimic, anxious, and drowning in royal protocol she didn't understand. She was a teenager thrust into the most scrutinized role on earth, with no training, no privacy, and a husband who seemed emotionally distant. And Charles? He was already in love with someone else. Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman the world would vilify. But before we cast her as the villain, let's understand her story. Charles and Camilla met in 1970 when he was 21 and she was 23. By all accounts, they clicked immediately. She was funny, down to earth, and didn't treat him like a prince. She treated him like a person. For someone who'd spent his entire life in a gilded cage, that was intoxicating. They fell in love, real, genuine love. But here's where duty enters the picture. Camilla had a past, previous relationships that made her, in the eyes of the royal establishment, unsuitable to be queen. The rules were brutal and clear. The future king needed a virgin bride from an appropriate background. So Charles, following the expectations placed on him since birth, didn't fight for her. And Camilla, heartbroken, married Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973. But the feelings never really went away. When Charles married Diana, Camilla was a part of his past that refused to stay buried. Not because she was scheming or manipulative, but because Charles never moved on. He kept her in his life, as a friend, as a confidant, and eventually as something more. Diana famously said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." She was right. But understanding why there were 3 doesn't excuse the pain. It just adds context to the tragedy. Diana tried. God, how she tried. She gave birth to William in 1982 and Harry in 1984. She threw herself into royal duties, touching AIDS patients when the world was terrified of the disease, walking through active minefields to campaign against landmines, holding sick children with a tenderness that cameras captured but couldn't fully convey. She became the most photographed woman in the world, the people's princess. And while the public adored her, Her private life was falling apart. Charles felt trapped too. He was in a marriage with a woman he cared for but didn't love the way he loved Camilla. He was criticized for being cold, unfeeling, a bad husband. And perhaps he was. But he was also a man who'd been forced into a role he never wanted with a woman he barely knew, all while being told it was his duty to make it work. The press noticed everything. Every awkward moment, every separate appearance, every icy glance. Diana battled bulimia, depression, and feelings of abandonment. She made desperate attempts to get Charles's attention, to save the marriage, to matter to him the way Camilla did. But the harder she tried, the more he withdrew. By 1986, Charles had resumed his affair with Camilla. By 1992, both Charles and Diana were cooperating with separate biographers, each telling their side of the story. The war had gone public. The Squidgy Gate and Camilla Gate tapes, private phone conversations leaked to the press, revealed just how far the marriage had deteriorated. The intimate, embarrassing details of their separate affairs became global headlines. In 1992, Prime Minister John Major announced their formal separation. In 1996, they divorced. The fairy tale was officially over. After the divorce, Diana was free, but freedom came with its own complications. She was still a princess, still a mother, still hounded by paparazzi who treated her like prey rather than a person. She dated, she struggled, she tried to find her place in a world that worshipped her image but didn't really know her. But she also found purpose. Her humanitarian work intensified. She auctioned her dresses to raise money for charity. She spoke openly about mental health, about eating disorders, about feeling unloved. And in doing so, she gave voice to millions who felt the same. Diana's greatest gift wasn't her beauty or her title. It was her humanity, her willingness to be vulnerable, to show that even princesses cry, even royalty can be broken. She once said, "I don't go by the rule book. I lead from the heart, not the head." And that's exactly what she did. August 31, 1997. Diana was in Paris with Dodi Fayed. They were trying to escape the paparazzi, photographers on motorcycles who chased their car through the streets like a pack of wolves. In the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, their driver lost control. The car crashed. Diana, only 36 years old, died from her injuries hours later. The world stopped. People who'd never met her wept in the streets. Mountains of flowers piled up outside Kensington Palace. 1 billion people watched her funeral. Charles, whatever their history, was devastated. He flew to Paris to bring her body home. He walked behind her coffin with their sons, William, just 15, and Harry, only 12, in one of the most painful public displays of grief ever witnessed. Camilla was there too, in the background, mourning quietly. Because despite everything, this wasn't about winning. It was about loss. In the years that followed, the story continued, but differently. Charles and Camilla eventually married in 2005. It wasn't a fairy tale wedding. It was quiet, civil, real. And over time, public opinion softened. People began to see them not as the villains of Diana's story, but as two people who'd loved each other for decades and finally found a way to be together. Camilla stepped into her role with grace. She didn't try to replace Diana. No one could. But she supported Charles. She did her duty. And slowly, she earned a measure of respect. William and Harry grew up. They carried their mother's legacy forward. William through his mental health advocacy and family life, Harry through his openness about trauma and his own struggles with royal life. Diana's impact never faded. Her warmth, her activism, her willingness to break protocol and simply be human, these things changed the monarchy forever. She showed that royalty could be relatable, that duty and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. And perhaps most importantly, she showed that even in heartbreak, kindness can shine through. So, what do we take from this story? Not that someone was the hero and someone was the villain. Not that love conquers all or that duty destroys everything. We take this: that real people, even royal ones, are complicated. That impossible choices leave scars. That being in the spotlight doesn't make you less human. It just makes your humanity harder to protect. Diana, Charles, and Camilla were all trying to survive in a system that valued tradition over truth, image over intimacy. They all made mistakes. They all suffered. And in the end, they all deserved compassion. Diana's life reminds us that even when the world is watching, even when your heart is breaking, you can still choose kindness. You can still touch lives. You can still matter. And maybe that's the real legacy of this story. Not the crown, not the scandal, but the reminder that beneath it all, we're all just human. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, kindness matters.